Hey everyone, I'm here today with John Tartaglia, who is the creative supervisor for the Fraggle Rock, Back to the Rock, and writer-director for Fraggle Rock stage show live that is coming to Jacksonville, Florida very soon. So thanks for joining me today, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So tell me about your, let's kind of get a Cliff Notes update on you for your journey into the Henson Company.
Oh gosh. Well, I knew that's a long story, but I'll try to do a very condensed version, like you said. I found puppetry when I was about 7, and actually it was the original Fraggle Rock series in the '80s that did it. I just fell in love with the original show, and I was fascinated on how people were taking these inanimate creatures and making them have so much heart and emotion and life. And I was like, I want to do that. And then became this kind of fan of all things Jim Henson, and that kind of started my interest. And then through a crazy series of events, when I was about 14, I got invited to a puppetry workshop in New York City for the Muppets, and which is basically an audition, and went through several rounds of that. And then I worked my first day on Sesame Street when I was 16, and from there, kind of just my career kind of started and kept going. So really, I knew very, very young what I wanted to do, and then was very blessed to have the opportunity at 16 to get to actually start to do it.
So what did you do on the show? How many characters have you performed?
Oh my gosh. Well, I was there for on and off for like 13 years. And I always say Sesame Street's kind of set up like SNL, where on SNL you have like the star performers, and then you have like the featured players who play like all the different supporting roles. So
Sure.
I would say I was kind of in the featured players category at Sesame Street, where I played like, the mailman and the letter X and a sheep and a bean and a piece of broccoli. I mean, you name it, you kind of do everything there. And so I got to really, and at the time I was there, it was still kind of a golden era of the show. So you still had almost all the original performers, a lot of the original crew. So it really was kind of, I always say I grew up partly on Sesame Street for real, which is really cool.
That's amazing. So, and then you stayed in the company the whole time, and how did you end up with Fraggle Rock?
Oh gosh. Well, I always wanted, of course, I was like, oh, if I could give anything, someday we bring back Fraggle Rock. And then I went off from Sesame Street and started doing some Broadway work. I kind of developed myself as a Broadway performer for many years and did 3 different Broadway shows. And then I kind of fell into writing and directing, and so kind of the other side of the lens and other side of the table. And then a few years later, a wonderful producer I'd worked with at the Jim Henson Company named Holly Stanford. I worked with her on a TV show as a performer when I was about 20. I cold called her one day about turning a show that I had written for theater into a TV series. And she was like, oh my gosh, that's so exciting. And basically invited me out to the Henson Company in LA and started having meetings there. And that show happened. And then because that show happened, I moved to Los Angeles and started working in a more creator and producer supervisor place for Henson. And then one day the opportunity came up to talk about bringing back Fraggle Rock. And luckily, Apple TV Plus, their kids division, was really excited about the idea of having the Fraggles on Apple TV Plus, and it all kind of came together. So it was just this wonderful. I always say, young me, manifested that 30 something years later I'd be working on Fraggle Rock again, because that's all I wanted to do when I was a kid, and somehow it came back. So it's really kind of a miracle, and here we are.
And for such a cherished IP and with so many fans,
Yeah.
being a creative supervisor, what does that title mean for you in that context, and what was it like having to find a way to bring it back?
Yeah, well, for a few years at the company, I became kind of like the unofficial Fraggle, nerd, where basically, when there was a question of like, oh, would they have a radish in this, or would they have a piece of garlic? I'd be like, oh, a radish. Like I'd always have had like the Fraggle facts, where I'd be like, oh, well, in episode 72, they did this thing. And so this information was always just kind of there for my obsession as a kid. And then when the TV series happened, when Apple TV Plus's Fraggle Rock Back to the Rock happened, we just started getting more requests for more Fraggle stuff and more toys and more apparel and things. And there really wasn't anyone at the company that had the Fraggle knowledge, nerd, or as I call it, nerd knowledge, that I did. And that's really how this supervisor role kind of came about. It was an opportunity to just kind of oversee all things Fraggle and make sure that there was a really nice protection of the canon, but also just making sure that, like, the color of red is consistent in all, in all forms, and that Boober's hat is the right hat in all forms. And, and it's really, for me, it's a dream job, because it's getting to literally every day play in the world that I most cherish as a kid.
That's amazing. Now, there was one fairly notable change in the Fraggles was Moki. So
Yes.
what can you tell me a little bit about that transformation from the original series to this one, her new glow
Well,
up?
it's funny because I when I was younger, I was such a purist, right? So when the idea first got raised about updating Moki, I was like, I was like clutching my pearls. I was like so horrified. But the more we talked about it, I really understood it. And I think what we realized is that, Moki in the early 80s was based on kind of that cool hippie, very like, like parents of the, parents with kids who had grown up in the 60s and 70s, who really understood that vibe. And that world is not quite as relatable as it was back then. But also, it's funny, over the years, when the original series would air, a lot of people kind of misunderstood who Moki was supposed to be. A lot of people thought that she was like their mom, or some people thought she was an old man, or there was always these odd comments back about Moki. And what we realized is that she just didn't feel quite as relatable to kids of today as we wanted her to. And even some of the folks who worked in the original series will tell you that they struggled with how to make Moki feel relatable. So we talked about it. We decided to keep all those great things we love about Moki. The fact that she's, into vibes, and, what would Moki of today be into? She'd be into like yoga, and be into BetterHelp, and breathing exercises, and emotional regulation. And still have that kind of, cool, hippie yoga feel, but just be a little more youthful in her energy. And Donna Kimball took over performing Moki from the amazing Kathy Mullen, the original performer. And Donna brings this whole kind of wackier side to Moki that just suddenly made her feel like she fit into that group of five a little bit easier. And suddenly she's still tall. She's still actually the exact same pattern the original puppet is made from. She just has a different hairdo and a different outfit, and we kind of loved the idea that of all the characters, Moki would be the one to be like, today I feel like wearing the dress, today I feel like wearing the robe. She could change it up. So we call it our Moki's Mokeover, and it's her refreshing. And I just think playing with what Donna brings to the character kind of opened up this world of, she doesn't have to always just be just the sensitive one, or just the more kind of Wendy to Peter Pan. She can also have these other funny, wacky sides to her. And then Donna just brings that out in her.
Here's the next thing is, how do you take that? What were the challenges of transferring it to a stage show?
Yeah.
And like, what have you done in the past that sort of educated you on being able to make that happen, but for better or worse?
That's such a great question. Yeah. I mean, I think, the first thing that was fascinating was the fact that it's never, in 40 something years of the show being around, it's never had a live version at all. There's never been a live touring version. There's never been a live concert. There's been nothing. So we really talked about, now's the time, because you have this beautiful, like, multi-generational love for Fraggle Rock, right? You have people my age and above who grew up with the original. You have kids of today watching the new series. So it felt like, let's give families an experience in the theater together where everyone gets something out of it. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to just a show for toddlers, or, you know what I mean? Like, let's make something that everyone can go to. And the best Jim Henson entertainment that we all grew up with, that's exactly what it was. It appealed to everybody. It was never just for one age group. The Muppet Show, even the original Sesame Street. Exactly. Yeah, the Muppet Show. I'm sure you loved it, right? Me too. Like, and the reason
I grew up on the Muppet Show, and I absolutely, for Fraggle Rock was one of my favorite Jim Henson things. Other than Dark Crystal, Fraggle Rock comes to a second.
And Dark Crystal, a 6-year-old can watch Dark Crystal and be fascinated by it, and a 90-year-old can watch it, and that's the best entertainment, right? Yeah. So we thought we thought this being its first theatrical adaptation, it was like the responsibility was to make something that everyone could enjoy. The biggest challenge was really the scale of the show. On Fraggle Rock, you have Borgs that are supposed to be 18 feet tall in real life. You have Fraggles that are about 2 feet tall, puppet-wise. You have Doozers that are 6 inches tall. So we made the call to scale the Fraggles up to human size so we could have our fabulous dancer actors perform them. And so you could get the Fraggles jumping and dancing and doing all the things they sing about. And then that made the puppets then get scaled up to hand puppet size, which is really on television Fraggle size. And then the real fun challenge was, well, then how do you do the Gorgs? How do you do the trash heap, who's about 6 feet tall in real life? How do you make her a puppet on stage? So then we got this opportunity to scale those creatures up. And then, so now you get this really big, beautiful stage picture of like, you know, a 12-foot tall Marjorie the trash heap and a, you know, a Gorg that's brought to life partly on stage, partly on video. And it's really fun to kind of, it was a fun challenge once we realized we had to do it that way. I think the biggest pressure I felt was just like, I knew that there were Fraggle fans like me coming to see it, not only bringing their kids, but also we found that we've got like people bringing dates, you know, who are just like, we're going to take a date night out and go see the Fraggles. And there's, you know, anything with nostalgia has expectations, right? So it was really making sure you're honoring the expectations of the people who loved the original, but also making sure that a 5-year-old who knows the new series is going to feel like it's for them too.
And did you find difficulty in writing the story, in writing this stage play, like the story itself, the plot, being there's so much reference material and so many things that have happened to the Fraggles before, to make something that would appeal to everybody like that was a difficult task.
It's funny that
Tackle that.
part, yeah, that part was actually I don't want to say easy because it sounds like, you know, it was effortless, and it wasn't. It was hard, but it was easier because I think I'm so lucky to get to write on this TV series. I know, and these characters are part of me. You know, like I know these characters like the back of my hand because I've loved them since I was so young. The harder part was more on TV. You know, because of the way we can film something, it's like, oh, if Red needs to jump off of a cliff and land in the pond and get everyone splashed with water, we can use different cuts to do that, different effects. We can use CG. There's so many ways we can do that. With a live stage show, you get one chance, and it's got to happen. It's got to happen multiple times a week, and it's got to fit into a truck. So it was more figuring out like what can we really pull off on stage that feels like you're in Fraggle Rock, but that is, you know, realistic to do 8, 9, 10 times a week, and can fit in a bus that can go around the country. So I think that was the only thing that felt difficult, was the things we couldn't do. You know, in my dream world, we'd have a live pond on stage and you could literally see the Red like cannonball into it, right? But can't quite tour that. So we had to make some.
That's more the arena tour, right?
Yes, yeah. Fraggles on ice or something, yeah.
Do you now? Everyone kind of has their favorites. Do you happen to have a favorite Fraggle that you identify with personally?
Oh God, that's like choosing your children, right?
Sorry,
like,
mine's this guy.
Oh, Boober, of course.
Boober. I always say Boober's my spirit animal. So.
Oh, I love Boober. Is my God, Dave Goles is a genius the way he does Boober. Well, I would say it is really genuinely hard because I love them all so much. But I would also be lying if I were to say, you know, doing Gobo is like the greatest honor I've ever had in my life. And, you know, Jerry Nelson, who originated him, was a hero puppeteer of mine. And to get to carry that on, I think he's my favorite puppet I've ever performed because he's such a beautiful puppet and he's so easy to perform. Secretly, I'll tell you the truth, I really love doing Architect Doozer because he's such fun to play. And he's just this wonderful, bumbling character. We've kind of written him more in the new series as he's full of non sequiturs, which makes me laugh. And Donna plays Cotterpin as well. We get to kind of riff off each other. So I always really love playing architects. I feel like that's the safest answer because picking a Doozer is easier than picking a Fraggle.
I know it's difficult.
It's tough.
So what's going to be next for you after the? Are you on the road with the stage play, or do you?
No, our voices
rise from far.
Yeah, our voices are part of the soundtrack. I'm not physically out there with them. But next is we're working on more Fraggle magic, and I'm lucky to direct theater too. So I have a bunch of theater things I'm working on right now, and some new TV series for Henson that are coming down the line. So
well, that's interesting.
yeah, I can't say, but it's all exciting stuff. It's good stuff.
Okay, good. I'll take your word for it. So
yes,
we look forward to seeing the show in Jacksonville for sure.
Thank you so much.